Words from Afar. That night, Arya sat down on the grass with her legs crossed under the starry sky. She wanted to hear the murmurs of the world besides of those of the men camping a few miles away from where Fernan had taken her. He sat vigilant beside her. She drew a deep breath, and with it, she felt herself expanding to the exterior. Another breath, farther she reached. And then again, until she was completely one with nature and could feel the magic all around her and in her. She recalled that her powers were not her property, but borrowed. The energy flowing in all things would go through her, and it was up to her to do good deeds, or let darkness interpellate her into a tool of evil. It was the everyday choice for thousands of people everywhere. She wouldn't be different. Although she liked to think she would always choose light, Arya knew she had too much darkness inside, too much anger, and it would let itself be expressed in the most indelicate manners when she argued with a loved one, or when she mercilessly ripped an enemy apart. To say it was indelicate was an understatement, of course, but to say it how it truly was would be giving in to the darkness, and she would never do that. Arya breathed again, smelling the winter approaching a few weeks ahead, if the winter had a smell. The same way she could hear the ground agitating like it did whenever it was bathed in blood. The blood she could smell also. It was brought by the wind from the outside the city walls where many men had died. Arya shook that thought from her mind and kept expanding her consciousness. She remembered telling a very young Eragon that she could easily speak to him, even in long distances, using only the power of her mind. It was true, and now so could he. She also remembered Oramis teaching her that many years before, and how he adverted her about the dangers of expanding the mind too far. The vulnerability of touching other beings could only be rewarded with aggression by those seeking to do harm. When would people stop hiding their true selves behind mental walls and facade? Wouldn't it be easier if we all could know each other's intentions and values? I sure am not following this principle as I hide so much from those I love. Arya felt Fernan cutting the last thread of connection between their minds in a tone of amusement. He laughed at her, and she knew why. Sometimes, Arya lived like she was first discovering life. Like she was a hatchling, watching the world with fresh eyes, instead of the experienced warrior she was. And that amused him immensely. It should amuse her as well, but every step into the unknown was as painful as a dagger going through the softest skin. Very often, her choices would have disastrous consequences. Other times, even if they were the right thing to do, they could still hurt someone. But that's the hardship of trying to remain in the light. She fought bravely that day like she always did. She had a mission, and she followed the right instructions. Yet she failed. Maybe it was time finally for her to admit that she could not be on the front line anymore, because not only she could not follow through with the plan of destroying Orin's war machines, but she put herself and Elva in danger. Again, she wished to be the fearless rider, but she was also the queen. Her life mattered in the great scheme of the world. Her people saw her as the continuation of her mother's legacy, for they were so similar in appearance, but in reality, she was all her father, who was impulsive and a free spirit. Although she knew that Islanzadi was only reserved and fearful for have losing Evander. Anyway, Arya wished to be a mixture of them both. Not only free-spirited, not only reserved. A little bit of both would be the ideal. Was she close to the ideal? Or so far that to be the ideal she would have to change completely? She hoped for the former and expected her people would see it as it was. In the morning, after having little rest, Arya could tell by the way Deathada pursed his lips that he was dissatisfied, and she knew exactly why. She had jumped into battle alone. Not alone, if Elva could be considered as a competent warrior, which in Arya's opinion she was. But her counselor would probably disagree. He was probably searching for the right words as he looked through the mirror, while Arya tried to look relaxed. She was sitting in a spacious room in the Lord's castle in Bellatona. It was the morning after their first defeat in the war against Serda. Dethida occupied her chair in the study. If he was feeling annoyed for being kept away from home, Silthram, during her absence, he never mentioned. Your Queen's Guard should arrive in 2 days. Excellent. You should not have left them behind, Your Majesty, if you allow me to say. Arya almost smirked. When have you ever needed permission to talk, Dethida? He seemed offended, looking away while he stirred slightly in his chair. Isn't my behavior of your liking, my lord? The noble elf stared at her, and Arya thought she saw a perverse pleasure forming behind his eyes, as what he had to say next was long stuck inside his chest. Or maybe she was only imagining things. You do everything your opposition wants you to do. You risk yourself. You keep strange individuals as your company. You run to the side of a human queen when you should be with your people. And most of all, you seem too fond of the head rider. Not that again, she complained to Fernan as he kept watchful of the enemy army outside the city walls. He had found the perfect spot on the terrace of the castle, a few levels above Arya's room. He will always talk about that, Arya. Your relationship with Eragon is severely condemned. I don't understand your surprise. I'm not surprised, I'm tired. Arya did not think of denying the accusations against her, for they were all true. She wanted, however, to be accepted for it all. Continue. The elf was not expecting her to be so receptive, so it took him a moment of silence to gather his thoughts. You acted as a rider would. And it has not passed unnoticed. In the council, the word is that you obey instead of ruling. They say I obey the head rider. Yes, your majesty. He paused so the next words would come out in a careful tone. They say you do it out of love for him, not duty. Arya let out an offended groan as she could not believe that. And she didn't. If she were to act solely as a rider, then she wouldn't be able to fight at all. How little did they know about her duties, and how much did they judge her? He could be playing you. To see if you reveal something. You think he's bluffing. How could he? I think you should be alert, that's all. He doesn't know the letter Eragon wrote is fake. He could be trying to add fuel to the fire and separate you two. Arya decided not to oppose him, but to have him by her side in case it was true what Fernan was thinking. It was a more cautious approach, although I could not seem that way. Dethida, are we friends? The man seemed guarded, but relaxed little by little until he finally answered, We are, Arya. Good, so you won't mind if I confide in you about my personal matters, will you? Arya, what are you doing? Putting my faith in his friendship. I need allies now more than ever. I told you to be careful. She felt Fernan fighting the impulse of flying to her and end that meeting for good. Arya tried to ignore him, knowing well he was at least partially right. Dethida's attention was completely drawn to her as he was drinking from her words. I do not mind at all. You can count on me. If he decided to betray her, it could be devastating for her image. Her crown could be in severe danger. But if he sided with her, as a good friend would, then she would have a powerful ally and good chances to resist the fight against the opposition. It was a risk she was willing to take, for she felt her power dimming by the minute. Arya looked away for a moment, and when she looked back at him, she saw sincerity. She saw the same support she had seen many years ago when her mother introduced him to her as a trusted advisor and friend. He would never betray her. How could he? No, Eragon and Fernan had never been so wrong. They were both too young to have met the man she held as her right hand in the most difficult situations they both went through. Sure, Dethida could be ruthless, but never to her. The right thing to do was to take the leap of faith and simply trust him. I do love him. I do, Dethida, but I have never and will never put my love for him in front of my duties as a queen or as a rider. And that is why we are good for each other. We have the same priorities. Do you believe me? For a non-elf spectator, his reaction could be considered a mere uninterested nod of understanding. For Arya, however, it seemed like he had a million thoughts running through his mind, leaving him unsure of what to say. She decided to relieve him of the obligation of responding to her question. We should talk further when we are reunited, and in a safe place, for I already feel my energy levels dimming slightly for keeping the scrying spell. Besides, I am afraid the letters Vanya is carrying at this moment will not help with my popularity. Deathada seemed to get out of his haze and suddenly know what Arya was saying, for he shook his head in a brusquer way than an elf usually did. They will have a hard time accepting to join Nasuada's forces. All because of this state of spirit in which you left our people. What have I done? Arya played innocent. He laughed humorlessly. Even if you have acted out of duty, not love for the Shadeslayer as you just stated, you got yourself trapped in Orin's plan. He nearly had you killed in the battle of yesterday. If the queen herself is not matched for a human king, then how her subjects are supposed to hold their ground? She hoped her actions would inspire her people, maybe make them think she was capable of great sacrifices for a cause. Wasn't that one of the reasons the noble houses had chosen her as the ruler? Apparently, they were more afraid than impressed, and more angry than empathetic. It was a mistake. I should have been more careful, she said in a low voice. But I believe our people also made a mistake. You all did. He looked confused enough for Arya to keep talking. The mistake of taking me for my mother. Your Majesty, we do not take why. You do. When you expect me to stay back, hidden. I am opening the forest, not hiding inside it. I am on the front line of our allies' army, for I am not one to pretend I am not needed when duty calls. I made the mistake of going into battle without my guard and my army, but I regret nothing, for I was being true to my beliefs. Arya never raised her voice, but as it was usual, Deathada became disconcerted by her bluntness and even exasperated. Preserve yourself. Don't go alone into battle, and stay away from human stupidity. That is all I ask you of, Arya, as your counselor, of course, but mainly as your friend. If not for him, then for me. Arya was not so sure what he meant by that plead, but Fernan's laugh in her mind made it all clear. The audacity of this man, I cannot believe it, he said. Calm down, Fernan, he has a point. He's comparing himself to Eragon. The alliance formed between Fernan and Eragon was deep after all. Who knew? She was still confused by their bond, but overall satisfied. Yes, but I need him now. I need him to think I value him, which I do. Are you ready to tell Eragon about all of that later? She wasn't, of course not. Facing Eragon would have to wait. I will be more careful, I promise, she said to Deathada. But to Fernan she shared the angst of having one more thing she was not telling Eragon. I must end the spell now. I hope to go back home soon. Eragon had not heard from Arya ever since she was preparing for battle the day before. He tried contacting her, but she seemed unreachable as she was using a protective spell to cut any possibility of scrying. He tried again just before he left the Eyrie to meet Hope for the day's lesson without success. Still nothing. I wonder why she is blocking me. Do you think she's being held captive? I'm not going to lie, little one, that's a possibility. Although I imagine we would have been informed by now if that were the case. Right. He moved away from the mirror and mounted on Saphira so they could meet Hope and Bredor outside the mountain. Before he could reach for her saddle with his right foot already on her front leg, however, he felt the hammer pendant he wore in a chain around his neck heating up against his skin. It must be her. He jumped back to the ground and went for his mirror, allowing to be scryed. But for his disappointment, the image he saw was not Arya's, but Murtog's. Sad to see me, brother, Murtog said with humor, despite the wrinkles in his forehead. Eragon shook his head. Of course not. I was just expecting to see someone else. But I'm glad it's you, so we can finally talk as I've been planning to do. Murtog seemed repented for a second, but the harsh expression came back to his face. I know I've been absent lately, but you must understand, it's not easy for me to be here when my pregnant wife is fighting a war miles and miles away. I do understand. What makes you think I don't? Your order for me to come north. I don't blame you. I know I'm needed here, but you could have been more understanding. Eragon was confused. Did Murtagh really think he was the one who decided who was needed where? Their positions as riders decided that he thought it was clear to them all. I don't think you understand the oath, brother. I just guide the riders where they should be, but I don't decide it all. If I did, I would be in a Lagaresia already, taking your place so you could be in the south, helping Arya. What do you mean you don't decide? You give the orders and we follow. Eragon smiled kindly and crossed his arms. Really? What was the last order I gave you apart from going north? Murtagh's face that was already serious became an upset mask. See, Eragon continued. I don't need to order you around all the time. You already know what to do, which is to lead the riders in a Lagaresia, however you see fit. Now, how are you supposed to do that if you take on another mission? But you ordered me to come. Didn't you know you had to? If I hadn't said anything, you would still have to go, for it's your duty as the leader of the order in a Lagaresia and my right hand. I simply reminded you of it. I am truly sorry if I sounded authoritarian, but I didn't want you to break the oath. You know what happens if you do. Murtagh let out a hurtful look, but nodded, quietly exempting his brother from any guilt. Breaking the oath was a terrible thing, and Eragon hoped never have to see that happening to any of his riders. If I weren't your right hand, would I be able to go south with Nasuada? Eragon shrugged, not sure where he intended to get with that question. It would depend on your new attribution. But probably. Murtagh stared at Eragon for far too long, which made him feel uneasy, wondering what his brother had in mind. Then nominate Rainier to take on the role, and I'll ferry the eggs or see to apply the new educational system. His voice raised an octave with excitement. And I'll be free to go south. Is it just me, or that sounded like a loophole in the oath? Saphira asked with curiosity. Eragon had been thinking about giving Rainier more responsibilities so he could one day be ready to take the place as the head rider. This conflict in the north made his plans become idle for the moment, but Murtagh's offer seemed the perfect opportunity to bring them to life again. Rainier would have to travel and make big decisions. Eragon could only hope he was ready for it. That is, in fact, a great idea, brother. I have big plans for Rainier, so your proposition comes in a good time. So I'm not your right hand anymore. What are my new attributions? He paused for a second and considered Murtagh's situation. Changing his role in the order would cause him to have new duties, so Eragon could make it more flexible or more rigid. Right now, flexibility was all he needed to accommodate the demands of his personal life, but at the same time, the North could use the reinforcement. You are not my right hand anymore. Murtagh's eyes lit up, and it strangely made Eragon's heart ache for a bit. Though I still wish you could finish preparing the young riders in the North for fighting the Razak. After it is all done, may Thorn and I go south. Aye. Replace Arya, will you, brother? And please, try to bring Nasuada back to Illyra. She's in no condition to spend her days on a battlefield. Murtagh smiled a sad smile, and the deep wrinkles came back as he scratched his dark beard. Easier said than done, but I will try my best. As Eragon prepared to say his goodbye and end the spell, he heard Murtagh's gratitude in a whispered thank you. It made him feel warm inside. If he could not have his freedom, then he would do all there was possible for others to have theirs. You did good, little one. Thank you, Saphira. They were so late to meet Hope and Bredor that if the students wished to turn the table and decided on a punishment for them, it would not be so absurd after all. Saphira laughed at his thought as they reached the outside and felt the fresh breeze announcing that the winter that year would come strong. Fall looked more and more grey with time, and soon the snow would cover it all.